Hi, my name is Kailey Frankenfield, and I attend the University of South Florida, Tampa campus. Millions of people struggle with drug use and addiction all over the world. People start doing drugs for many different reasons, whether it be a coping mechanism or just a party, but all the less it is a major problem. According to a journal written by Edmund and Erickson titled Knowledge, Values, and Needle Exchange Programs in Sweden in 2017, people who inject drugs are 22 times more at risk for HIV than the general population. Because of this problem, needle exchange programs began to pop up around Europe and eventually made their way to the United States. Today, I will be discussing needle exchange programs, their purpose, and how they operate. Thousands and thousands of people inject drugs yearly, and the safest way to use these drugs is to use a sterile needle every time. But many people who use drugs are very addicted and use them multiple times a day, so this can be a costly activity to keep purchasing sterile needles. This can lead to sharing needles among friends and other drug users, or reusing old needles, which is very dangerous. What is the purpose of needle exchange programs? Well, needle exchange programs are intended to reduce high-risk behaviors associated with injecting drugs. These high-risk behaviors include sharing and reusing needles. This is dangerous because the needles come into contact with blood and can be contaminated with diseases such as HIV or hepatitis B or C. So when a person shares a needle to inject drugs, they can contract diseases that may eventually be deadly. The purpose of needle exchange programs is to reduce the amount of people infected with diseases such as HIV and hepatitis B and C, contracted to the use of contaminated needles. How do needle exchange programs operate? Needle exchange programs first started in Europe, specifically Sweden. Then the United States adopted the idea and began opening some needle exchange programs in California. Most needle exchange programs allow people to bring in their contaminated needles in exchange for sterile needles in a 1-to-1 ratio. This means that people can bring in as many contaminated needles as they want to and receive the same number of sterile needles in exchange. A smaller amount of needle exchange programs charge a few dollars for sterile needles instead of exchanging old needles. Needle exchange programs facilitate the proper disposal of contaminated needles. Prior to needle exchange programs, drug users had no incentive to hold onto contaminated needles and would litter them onto the streets. This is very dangerous as they can infect people who don't even use drugs. But after the needle exchange programs, drug users have an incentive to keep their contaminated needles to exchange them for sterile needles. This helps keep the community free of used needles in the streets and can keep the general population from coming into contact with the diseases the needles may carry. Needle exchange programs also do more than just exchanging needles. These programs try to help drug addicts by offering access to mental health services and HIV treatment and prevention services. This way, programs can try to help people who are struggling with addiction and try to help them quit safely. With the access to mental health services, drug users can seek help and try to better themselves mentally in order to stop using drugs and reduce their drug use. Is there any controversy over the needle exchange programs? Well, some people believe that giving drug addicts continuous access to sterile needles is immoral, as they are promoting and/or condoning drug use. A counterpoint to this argument is that the program reduces the risk of contracting HIV and hepatitis B or C among drug users. Therefore, it makes it moral to encourage drug use as they are striving to keep the population safe. In conclusion, the purpose of the needle exchange program is to reduce the high-risk behavior related to injecting drugs. For example, sharing needles and reusing needles. Through this program, drug addicts can bring in used needles in exchange for sterile needles, with the goal of reducing the risk of HIV or hepatitis C, among other diseases that can be contracted through unsafe drug use. Needle exchange programs also offer more services than just exchanging needles, like mental health services and prevention and treatment of HIV to help drug addicts. Like many things in the community, the needle exchange programs create controversy as people try to decide if the good of reducing the risk of diseases is worth the slight increase in drug use in the community because of continuous access to sterile needles. Overall, needle exchange programs strive to keep the community healthier and reduce the high-risk behavior associated with injecting drugs. Thank you for listening to me inform you guys about the needle exchange program.